My name is Kimberly Thornbury, and I serve as a vice president here at the King's College. And it is a great honor to welcome Leigh Bortins to speak to us today about mothers and money, building businesses with babies. I want to welcome those in the room and also the many who are joining us by live stream today. We're so glad that you could join us. Just for my curiosity, might you raise your hand if you were homeschooled in general, if you teach or were homeschooled at any point in your life? Okay, that's a lot of you. Raise your hand too if you were at all influenced by classical conversations in this room. A lot of you. Very good. Well, Leigh Bortins is the founder and chief visionary officer of Classical Conversations, Inc., an organization that supports homeschool families across the globe. Besides earning her undergraduate degree in aerospace engineering, Leigh Bortins also holds a doctorate in global church-based education. Leigh Bortins is the author of a dozen books on classical Christian education that grew out of her own experiences of homeschooling. Will Bortins, her son, is a senior business major here at the King's College in the house of C.S. Lewis, and he's here with us today. So will you join me in welcoming Leigh Bortins?
Nice. Okay, can you hear me? Good. I always have to have water when I speak. Well, thank you for being here, and I want to really thank Tim Gibson, the president of the school, as well as Kimberly for arranging all of this, and then all these staff members that are making all these lights in action occur. So it's just been a lot of effort, and they've really made sure I had a good day. I was able to do interviews this morning for some graduating King's College students, as well as they have like lunch and other activities for me. So I just really appreciate how gracious you are being. It's a really nice setup. Before you leave today, because I'm afraid I'll forget, I have two things that have meaning to this speech. One is I have a handout, but I don't want to hand it out until later. And then I do have a few catalogs if somebody would like to see a Classical Conversations catalog. It explains a lot more than I'd be able to in the 45 minutes or so that I have. The reason I don't want to do my handout first is you'll read that instead of listening to me. I've been speaking to crowds for a long time, so hopefully I know a few tricks by now. So thank you, everyone, for being here. All right, so before I talk about probably the main topic you're interested in, classical conversations, I thought I will introduce myself. I don't like doing that. I'd rather talk about the Lord, so guess what? I'm going to tell you about him and me together. All right, so because one of the reasons I think that I'm here is because I've had some sort of level of success in what I'm doing. And I wonder every single day why I'm successful when so many other people aren't, and what's the difference? So here's what I can tell you about kind of how I view my measure of success. I know how it feels to be part of a large extended family that raised all the children to hear the words, "well done." So I really appreciate the mother and father that I have. I've been married for 36 years to a man named Robert who loves me the way Christ loves the church. And I know what a gift that is. I have 4 sons, a daughter-in-law, and 2 grandchildren who rise up daily and call me blessed. The Lord has allowed me to love him with my whole mind. I have not only those degrees she referred to, but also all the books I've written, and then just constantly being in front of audiences, learning from them, speaking, engaging. And he's used that to help me love his people. As of July, when I'm going to Africa, we're growing greatly in South Africa, I will have been on all 7 continents and have met people from all of them, including Antarctica. There are people who live there. Okay? And what's really amazing is for some reason they want to listen to me. My books sell very well. And it's been really an encouragement to see the Lord provide for us through all this as my husband has worked on his investments and his business side of just the things that he loves. And so our provision in every step of the way I recognize is from the Lord. And I would just really encourage you, if you get nothing else from this time with me, is to know I love him so very much, and he loves me even more, and I want you to know that same love. That's the main thing of wherever I speak, is that he's got to be lifted up. Because all those things I just listed to you, I'm like Paul in Philippians 3:8, I consider them all loss compared to the surpassing knowledge of my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And even though I'm famous for classical conversations, I want you to know my greatest joy has been being a mother, because it's through motherhood that I've learned the sufficiency of Jesus Christ. Our beloved fourth son, David, would never have been born if our son Benjamin hadn't died. Besides raising the 4 boys we have, I've had lots of miscarriages, as well as, held him. And that's made it so I could be compassionate to other mothers who are struggling with raising families and different needs. The only thing I haven't done as a mother is had multiples. And I really wish I could have done that, but I don't know the trick to making that happen. So I share all that with you just to testify that every word in the scripture is spirit-breathed. And the most important part of what I think might be what makes me successful. And the reason I want to question that again in front of you is because there's a lot of people who started businesses in homeschooling the same year I did. It had become prolific enough and there was needs enough, and hardly any of them are still in business at this point. And I can't say, well, one of them was more or less godly than me, smarter than me, harder worker than me. I don't know why you get the success you do. And you are all about to graduate and you're trying to figure out what in the world's going to come next. And I wish that I could offer you some secret formula. There isn't one. And so just to pray and to love him, and you'll always feel successful no matter what happens. Okay, so that's a lot about me. All right, let's talk about classical conversations for a few minutes. So a lot of you raised your hands. We'll let that go. I think I'll talk about classical conversations in a way I normally don't. I knew I would have a different audience, and so maybe more of a broad overview of how things came to be the way they are, and then relate it to some business ideas, because I know a lot of you, the students, are business majors that are here, and maybe help them with some ideas as they go out into whatever the next adventure is they have with the Lord. So, for those of you that don't know, what is Classical Conversations? It's basically a kindergarten to 12th grade educational services company that supports homeschoolers. That's what I put in all my business reports. What we really do, though, the basic idea is if somebody in the audience wanted to help their local homeschool community work on Christian classical education, it takes a lot to recover the damage done by modern secular education. And if you want to unite with other people and work on recovering what the Lord's given us for thousands of years as a model of education, it takes some time and effort. And so if you wanted to do that, we would help train you, get materials to you. We have all kinds of websites and social media and all kinds of support things. And then you would help folks in your own community kind of just duplicate what we're doing with you. So whenever I first started Classical Conversations, I was only trying to help our eldest son, Robert, have a classical education in high school. One of the things my husband and I recognized was that you needed other people to really learn classically, because the dialectic, Socratic methods, asking lots of questions, I suppose the 5 of us, or 4 of us at the time, could have just asked questions of each other all the time, but you want some other input, right, and from both peers and other adults and mentors. And so that's what we were looking for. And then I also had a lot of our son's friends were going into high school and were not going to homeschool anymore. And I was like, stop, my kids need friends, I'll help you. Don't do that, right? So there was a lot of motivation, around that. And so I put together basically what I was going to do with Robert in a more organized manner, and had 11 children in our basement, and we just talked for 6 hours once a week. Now, back then, it was a twice-a-week program. A lot of people don't know this. The second week was not with CC. This was before the internet existed. And the second day in the week, they went to the library for the day with their family so they could do all the research they needed in order to join us the next week and be prepared. And I can remember when that changed, a young woman walked into the basement and she said, my mother made us go to the library this week. And I went, oh, I hadn't thought about that. No one's been going to the library anymore. So we've had, some changes with technology. Well, that went well enough that within a few years, we had 300 people on the waiting list. And so I started talking to my friends who were homeschooling and said, can you help? Can you help me organize other folks? And we'll work through this system. And so they're like, well, how are you going to train us? How are you going to pay us? What's going to happen? And so I had this really grand idea, and it totally failed. My first business model with Classical Conversation was, so Kimberly wants to start a CC program for us. If you'd pay me $600, I would just pour into you all the training I could, and then you could just go run a program. Well, homeschool mothers, and again, part of my topic here, homeschool mothers are a little different than everybody else. They're not careerists, they're on one income. They don't want to give me $600. So nobody signed up. But that was okay, I still had the waiting list, and I still knew lots of people. So I said, all right, I'm just going to have to pay for it out of my own pocket because I believe in this, and I know they don't have money, but we'll flip it. Until they actually get tuitions from the students and the families they're helping, I won't take any money. But once they get them, I'll take a percent. And so I take a much higher percent than $600 would be because why? I take all the risk. Right, so I end up making more money, but the barrier to entry immediately fell, and all kinds of people wanted to be part of it because they knew what they would receive, and then the income would follow. So it's a backwards business practice. Very few organizations that aren't nonprofits, and we were for-profit, would do things this way. So, but it's okay, because the Lord said turn the world upside down, so that's what we're going to do. One of the things also that I realized or recognized really quickly was that homeschooling moms were all amateurs. Right? They weren't experts in trying to teach physics and Latin and literature and logic. And I think one of the things that's destroyed culture is that we have so much professionalism and so many experts in every field that people don't try because they can't measure up to the experts. And they say, well, someone else can go do that. And of course, that's and only over the last about 50 years that's been a thought in American culture. Homeschool moms are saying, nope, I'm the doctor, I'm going to birth them at home, I'm going to feed them organic foods, I'm going to teach them all the subjects I can, we're going to travel, we're going to have goats, we're going to be in 4-H, right? And so they really embody the early American idea that we misquote was that you would be a jack of all trades, not a master of none, but a master of one. All right, so of course there's an efficiency to doing things well and to knowing what your purpose and your gifting is. But if you do that at the expense of just general life and general service to your community, there's going to be a loss. So I'm thrilled there's brain surgeons who are experts, but I'm really thrilled there's general practitioners who are just going to ask you about your diet and your lifestyle, and there might be lead in your pipes. All right? So we need to have both. So I was going to be working with mothers who were mama bears. Boy, were they going to know what was right for their child. And so I was asking them to compromise. Because if you're working a day a week for 6 hours with other people's children, you need to give up a little bit of your own ambitions for your children in order to give that kind of time. And so, but the compromise I thought was compensated by that your child learned to be a mission in their own community, that they knew mom and dad weren't going to always give me 100% of my time. There's other people they're going to serve. And isn't it nice that I don't have to go to daycare while they're doing it? I'm part of the whole system and the business that they're part of, too. So there's compromise. And again, working with mothers, they all juggle plates. How in the world can I help my high school student when I've got 3 of them learning phonics? Ask the Lord. I don't know, right? Each of you has to figure that out for yourself. And so it just was a real pleasure to put together a system where we've never told anybody that they're going to have expert help at any of the levels. This is what they will have. Somebody who loves the Lord and loves children and loves learning and will do their best to model that for you, with you, and for your child. And so we become part of a community of lifelong learners together. So there are other cooperative types of models where homeschoolers will pay for an expert to come in and teach chemistry or Yeah, I'm picking on the hard ones, though English literature could be hard, to you. But that's not ours. Our model is you are going to be engrossed in the classical liberal arts, which means you know what the arts are, and you're going to apply them to any subject that you study. That's probably something I don't have time to really explain, is the actual academic side of what we do, but maybe during our question and answer time I can do that. So it was a real challenge to work with these moms. I shouldn't say it that way, not with the moms, but when you go to market, right? What do you mean she doesn't know physics? How is she teaching physics? She knows how to read. She can work through the material. She's working with 13-year-olds and 16-year-olds. She's older than they are. She's got more experience than they do. It's for an hour a week. She can learn enough to have a great conversation and help on that, right? Because it's one of the many hundreds of things that she is getting good at. And so we've trusted people to do a bad job, because the only way to recover what's been lost is to let them try. And so whenever, especially men will ask me, but why am I paying this money for this person who's just starting out? And I'll say, well, are you a venture capitalist? Do you know how business works? All first round funding fails, right? It's just the way it is. But it's not to the second round that you actually start to see the results. And boy, is that third round lucrative. So if we're claiming we want Christian classical education to exist, somebody has to start. And if they're not supported, it won't start at all. So there was a lot of just odd business things to overcome, because homeschooling's weird, Christianity's odd to the culture, and then classicalism, what in the world is that? But it was really fun working through this for the last 22 years. So in 2002, my husband Rob was able to quit work. Well, I shouldn't say he was able to. He did quit work because we'd gotten so big. I needed to have back office kind of help, and I was just speaking and doing all the training. So for 2 years, we lived on $13,000 each of those years. And it was okay. Didn't matter, because our provision's the Lord, nothing else, right? And so that was a good lesson that we learned. Then in 2013, so 11 years later, our eldest son Robert took over Classical Conversations, and he is now our CEO. And so he really systematized the business side of the business, or the back office side of the business, so that the moms that were involved, some of your parents, maybe these moms I'm referring to, could work on the training and the academics. And then we got folks in who were experts and professionals for IT and for accounting. Right, so the things that weren't the face of our community, we try to hire the very best people that we can. So with offering all that training, with the marketing, with data, with accounting, all that, our back office now, we have almost 100 employees. And if you count everybody, we have about 110 employees, and if you count our contractors, we have almost 3,000. It has really developed into a big business. So one of our challenges has been, how do we balance that whole corporate side of things in order to meet the demand, and yet at the same time keep the local communities what they want them to be, family-oriented communities, not having to obey so many bureaucratic rules. We've done some of that well, and we've done some of that badly. We feel like the last 3 to 4 years, when we've been really trying to work through those issues, we are an odd business model. We always have to plan our work on growth, but we don't get any of the money to the next year, right? So that's a really tight thing for about 4 to 5 months every year when that growth is occurring, and so we need all that more technology and the behind-the-scene people, and yet we know we're not getting tuitions and book sales till later. And so that's why I say we've done some things really well and some things really badly, because sometimes the resources aren't quite there yet, but we catch up. We get there eventually. So in 2019, is that where we are right now? Yep. The fall of 2018, we had over 130,000 students in the United States enrolled in Classical Conversations. That's about 75,000 families. And those of you that are in the room that are in CC can testify to this. That 130,000 students does not represent who we're reaching, because the parents, it's not a drop-off program. So the parents are all there. So that's another 70,000 parents. And then almost all those parents have toddlers. So that's another 70,000 toddlers. So we're reaching 250,000 to 500,000 people in any given year because the whole family comes along with the program. So that's been really exciting. So before I get to my question and answer, I want to go over one more really, I guess, two big changes that are occurring. I'm trying to decide which order to do it in. Okay, so, or to tell about it. And there's been differences in homeschooling over the last 35 years. And that's another challenge that we're facing as business owners. When I first started Classical Conversations, some of my first back office employees were also homeschooling parents who either had some additional time or had empty nested or had a skill they were willing to work with us for 10 to 20 hours a week on. And so if one of my first 5 to 8 employees looked at me and said, hey, my kid's got to play next week, or I have soccer practice tonight, or my child did not get math done, can I go home? What was my answer? Yes. Because why? In the early years, I knew that we had slow seasons and busy seasons, and that all these people who were working with me would work very hard in the busy season because they knew they could take off when they wanted to in the other part of the year. Well, the hiring regulations now forbid that. If you are an hourly employee and you go over 40 hours in a week, I have to give you overtime, even if I know that that you're going to work. So from your perspective, you want to work more hours because you know the next week you're going to take 2 days off. That's against the law. So things that are hurting Classical Conversations at this point. People thought, that we'd be attacked for homeschooling eventually, or we'd be attacked for our Christian worldview, or we'd be attacked because this classicalism was elitist and our kids are snobs. I mean, who knew what it was going to be? Or I had to hire the gay agenda, or whatever it was, political correctness, any of those things. It's not. The thing that is hurting us the most is insipid, very subtle government bureaucracy in the rules and regulations we're having to comply with. And even though Trump has done a really good job in releasing us from a few of those at the federal level, because we operate in 3,000 counties in the United States, the counties are taking over as little tyrants and making some of this impossible for us, as well as various states are harder to work in than others. And so it's a frustrating thing, but the Lord's going to overcome it for us. We're going to figure out what to do, and we may make some bad decisions at first because it's a moving target. As soon as you get a new governor in one of these states that are oppressive, he can just wipe the laws out, and then we're back to the next round of things, changes. So I would ask that you pray for us for that, because that's more of a wisdom and kind of a balance issue on the business sides. There's various states that we would consider not even being in, because they're so oppressive at this point. So that's one thing. So between the part-time employment with the moms and dads that worked with us, and then the oppression on the bureaucratic side. But the third, well, first of all, I forgive this next example. I'm going to give you what will seem like an unrelated example. Are you all familiar with microloans that are done in second and third world nations? Most of you are shaking your head. So one of the countries we're growing rapidly in is Brazil. And Brazil has pretty extensive microloan programs. And this has only come to my attention this fall. But every time the government gets involved with something, it makes problems. We have a saying in CC, with the shekels come the shackles. And so in Brazil, if you've taken a microloan, and then you find another business you want to be part of. So these moms trying to pull together 2 or 3 businesses that will help feed their family. They cannot take another job until they pay off the microloans. So they're stuck with the microloan business and nothing else until that's paid off, right? I'm sorry, I'm here with Reagan. When the government says I'm here to help run, right? And so lots of things that are happening now in our country is homeschoolers asking the government to help. And in the early years, we just said, just leave us alone, just leave us alone. We don't want your money, we don't want your books, we're not, give me 40 acres and a mule, just leave me alone. I don't want your $800 on a laptop. All right, that's the comparison of what's happening now. And so those of you that a lot of hands went up, you may homeschool your own children. Please don't undermine the work that we've done for 35 years by thinking that somebody else should pay your bills and that you're part of the entitlement culture that's really quite prevalent today. So we have a lot of education that we continue to do. And so there's a lot of states now that want to help us. And so we look like we are against homeschooling because we try so hard to lobby in the opposite direction because we see the destruction that's occurring. For example, there's one state, California, where they give a lot of voucher money. And most of the CC families have pulled out of receiving the voucher money because California is also a state where they have to have accountability and send their paperwork in that the students created. And as soon as the word Jesus is in it, you have to rewrite the paper. And so that's a story they tell over and over when I'm out there, right? With the shekels come the shackles. The Lord has way more money than your state does, okay? So consider that. All right, and then one more thing I want to tell you about before I open up for questions, because I have to 1 o'clock? Yeah, okay. Is one of the ways to overcome, or I shouldn't say overcome, to go around what's happening here in the States, is we've now begun to grow in countries all over the world. So that's why I know about what's going on in Brazil. In 2016, we hired our first couple to be the staff leaders in Russia. And this fall, they had 100 communities. So 1 year later, they had 100 communities with a couple of thousand students attending. And then in November, the folks that we work with in Brazil, they had, over the last few years, had a series of online conferences. And one of the reasons they contacted us a year plus ago, was one of many reasons, was they'd had 100,000 people attend their seminar. It's like a 2-day, you know how they do online streaming and webinars and recording, and people can hit and look at it later. It was one of those kind of events. Well, this past November, when they did the event, they had 1 million visitors in the 2 days. All right. Yeah, holy cow. I didn't know there was that many people in Brazil, let alone that many homeschoolers there, right? So we can go to these other countries. We've been in other countries for a long time. We're in about, actually, I asked my staff to tell me how many, so I could tell you exactly. Let me look up real quick here. We're in 33 countries, 15 of which have committed leadership, right? So that means we're spending money on them. The other ones, we just help when we can. It's a lot of, money for airplanes and things like that. So I want to compare for you what we're seeing in these cultures, because everywhere I go, Hungary, Slovenia, wherever I go, people beg me for books. And the first time that happened was when I was in Brazil a few years ago, speaking at a homeschool conference. And I was like, what do you mean you don't have books? Right, I'm an American. What do you mean you don't have books? And they said, we don't have books. We're not part really of Western culture the way that you are. We don't have children's literature. We don't have children's books. We don't have textbooks. They're in the schools, and we don't want to use theirs. And I said to them, so what do your little girls read when they're sitting under a tree waiting for you somewhere, right? This is just so foreign to me. They don't. That's not our culture. So I am sure there's parts of the culture that are that way, but these homeschooling moms coming to me are asking it this way. And so by the end of that conference, I came to them, I said, but you do. You're thinking like a school person. Don't do that. Don't you guys have the Bible? Don't you have folklore? Don't you have hymns and songs? Right? And so, do you have newspapers? I started listing all the printed material that surely they had, both traditional and modern. And they said, yes. And I said, you're fine. Homeschool with that stuff, right? So breaking that mentality that it's something the government gave to you in a scope and sequence is that's education instead of just learning how to read, write, and think with the materials that you have. So, but the sad thing about it is they never had a culture that developed that, right? In Russia, same questions. And I said the same thing about the girl under the tree. That's like my way of asking. And my friend said, oh, we're rich in literature, but you remember the communists took it away from us for 50 years. And so people don't know what it is anymore, right? So they're working to reprint the old stuff that used to be around. So one culture never had it. The other one had it taken away from them. The United States and Western Europe has a rich history of hundreds of years of amazing literature for all ages and all types. But Americans aren't reading it. So which is worse? Having your literacy taken from you, never having it in the first place, or giving it away? This is the challenge of classical Christian home education. We love everybody, whether they're in our program or not, and we believe that if people know words, they can know the Word of God a lot more easily. And so it's imperative that we maintain books and be keepers of the books and look at how Christian culture has advanced over the last 2,000 years, and don't throw out the baby with the bathwater as technology and progress hits us in the face, because it does. That's where we live.